Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
There's virtually nothing better than knowing you have the power within you, quite literally, to save a life, whether that be a friend, family member, or a Canadian you've never met before. That feeling of gratitude is exactly what I felt the first time I rolled up my sleeve and donated blood with the Canadian Blood Services. I was a little nervous the first time I went in, honestly. I had to answer a few questions, and then it was blood taking time. It all went by pretty quickly. I thought I wouldn't want to look as they were drawing the blood, but I found myself actually pretty fascinated by the whole process. Before I knew it, it was over, and I was told to sit down and eat some sugar cookies. Easily the best part of the assignment. And while it's important to donate whole blood, there's some liquid gold within the blood itself that is fundamental to keeping Canada healthy and ensuring our healthcare system has what it needs to save lives every day. All you need to do is roll up your sleeves. I'm Gurdeep Ahluwalia, and today on The Big Story, I'm talking to Jessica Carswell, Director, Strategic Engagements at Canadian Blood Services, to break down just how important plasma is to the Canadian healthcare system and the potential you have to keep the supply up so that it's ready when it's needed. Jessica, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, so let's get into it. When people think about donating blood, generally the focus, is on the blood itself and how that can help Canadians in need. But there's actually an ingredient in the blood that's just as vital, and that's plasma. Tell us about plasma and what makes it different from whole blood.
Yeah, when people think about blood, they usually picture it as one thing, but it's actually a mix of different parts. So whole blood is everything that's flowing through your veins. It's your red cells, your white cells, your platelets, and your plasma. Plasma is that liquid part. It's pale yellow, it's protein rich, and it plays a huge part in your immune system. It actually makes up more than half of your blood volume. So if whole blood is the full package, plasma is just that liquid part that's holding it all together.
Okay, and how is donated plasma actually used, both in transfusions and also in things like making medications?
Yeah, so at Canadian Blood Services, we collect plasma for both uses. So one option is that it is collected, tested, and sent directly to patients in hospitals for transfusions, often in trauma or treatment of liver disease or severe infections. But the other way that we can use plasma is we collect it and it becomes the raw material that's used to make specialized medications like immunoglobulin. It's a bit of a tongue twister word, but it's a specialized plasma medication. We send that plasma to manufacturing plants where they separate out all the different proteins in plasma, turn it into this medication, and send it back to us so we can send it to patients here in Canada.
Okay, and I understand there's been some confusion expressed by donors about how Canadian plasma is used and if it's used, quote unquote, for profit. Can you add any clarity to that?
Absolutely. Look, I get it. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and I'm a plasma donor myself, so I would naturally have questions too. But what I hope everyone listening can take away from this is that if you're walking into a Canadian Blood Services donor center or one of our mobile events, be absolutely assured that 100% of your donation is staying here in Canada for Canadian patients. When your donation is turned into medications, those medications are also coming back to patients right here in Canada. So none of the plasma or the whole blood that's donated at our centers or our mobiles is ever sold or used for profit.
Okay, so the key there is if people are donating, just make sure that it's with Canadian Blood Services.
Yes.
Okay, got it. So why is plasma donation so critical to Canadian healthcare right now? I feel like I've heard about blood donation my whole life, but I'm only sort of recently hearing more about plasma.
Yeah, so here in Canada, we have been monitoring the demand for immunoglobulins over the last number of years. And what we're seeing is that demand is growing very quickly. Just to give you a quick number, we need more than double our plasma collections in the next 5 years just to keep up with that demand for immunoglobulin. And right now, we rely heavily on importing immunoglobulins from the global market. About 70% is imported. So we're particularly exposed if there's international supply chain disruptions or anything happening on that global market. Thankfully, we haven't seen any shortages lately, but we're not willing to take a chance here. So this is why we're stepping up our plasma donation here in Canada.
Okay, so there is quite a shortage, it sounds like. And can anyone who donates blood donate plasma? Do you sort of get a say, or is it just like the blood is pulled and then Canadian Blood Services will sort of use it as they see fit?
Yeah, so you can donate whole blood, and we will pull the plasma out of that and use it either for transfusion or for medications, as I mentioned before. Or you can donate strictly plasma. So, in general, the eligibility for the two programs is very similar. There's a bit more flexibility with plasma donation because the medications go through many stages of processing before they reach the final patient. But one key difference for plasma donation is around the eligibility for criteria related to malaria. So if you've recently traveled to an area with higher rates of malaria or you've had malaria, you may be eligible to donate plasma, whereas you would not be eligible to donate whole blood. And like I said, this is because the process manufacturing the medications removes that parasite that causes malaria. But our eligibility changes regularly, and we try to keep up with the latest science and the latest evidence. So if anybody has any questions or wants to learn more, our website, blood.ca or Give Blood app have tons of information on eligibility.
Okay, so if someone's thinking about donating plasma, look, in the intro, I just described my experience donating blood, sort of in a nutshell. Is it a similar process for donating plasma? Like, walk me through it if I was to walk in and donate plasma at Canadian Blood Services.
Yeah, the process will feel very similar. You'll go through the same sort of screening questions with one of our staff members at the site. They'll ask you some questions about your general health and wellness. But the real difference in the process is when you get onto the donation bed. So in a whole blood donation, we're just taking the whole blood out, and that's it. That's the end of the donation. In plasma, however, we take the whole blood out, we spin it around in a machine very quickly, and we actually return all of those components of the blood that I talked about earlier. So your red cells, your platelets, your white cells, those come back to you, and we just keep the plasma. So because of that process, plasma donation does take a little bit longer. We say to budget about an hour of your time, but it feels the same. And once you're on the big comfy bed, the donation is over. You get the same great snacks at the end of it.
Okay, that was the part I was most concerned about, really. You mentioned, Jessica, that you are a plasma donor. So what was the experience like for you?
Yeah, I started out as a whole blood donor. I've been donating for about 20 years now. So I switched over to plasma when I realized that you can donate every week. So with plasma, because we give all of those components back to you, you're able to come back in more frequently than you would with a whole blood donation. So I switched over to plasma about 5 years ago, and I haven't switched back. I love the staff at the center that I go to. Because I'm in every week, you really get to know the team there. You really get to build a relationship with them. And naturally, I go back for the snacks.
A big question for people thinking about donating is about eligibility, which you touched on a little bit there. Are there differences in some of the screening questions in terms of being eligible to donate whole blood versus donating plasma?
Yeah, the plasma questionnaire is a little bit shorter. There's a few questions that we ask if you're donating whole blood that we don't ask if you're donating plasma. So that part is a little bit different. And then there's a few other just common reasons that you can't donate whole blood that are not as much of a concern for plasma. So one of the great examples is if you've had dental work on the day of your donation or a couple days on either side, you're not eligible to donate whole blood just because there is a potential for bacterial contamination. Not that you're sick, not that there's anything wrong, but just that could be in the whole blood donation. Whereas in plasma, we freeze plasma right away. So any potential bacteria there is frozen.
Okay. Is there one most common reason people are turned away from donating plasma that they should know about?
The most common reasons vary, but they're typically things like if you're not feeling well, or if you've had a recent medical test that you're waiting on the results for, or if your hemoglobin, which is the iron in your blood, if that's too low. Those are the most common reasons we see people not eligible to donate, but those are all temporary. They're all easily resolved, and they're all safety-based decisions that we have in place to protect both the donor and the patient. So usually once the short period of time has passed, you can return to donate if those are the reasons that you were ineligible.
Okay. And you touched on earlier the shortage of plasma right now. So practically, what does that look like? When there isn't enough plasma available, how does that affect patient care?
Yeah, so thankfully, we haven't seen a true shortage. We have been able to maintain patient care and provide patients with the products that they need when and where they need them. But what we're looking at is the long-term growth. We're looking a few years out, and we're seeing the growth in immunoglobulin just grow exponentially. So what we're trying to do is be proactive about protecting our domestic supply of plasma, because for many of these patients who rely on immunoglobulins to stay healthy or to stay alive, they don't have another option for treatment. And so uncertainty around the supply chain can be really stressful, which is why we're trying to push for more plasma donation. We're trying to secure this domestic supply chain for those outer years and to make sure that we don't see those supply chain disruptions.
Jessica, for someone who's listening to this and is thinking, hey, you know what? I've never donated blood and I've never donated plasma. And hey, maybe this is a really good idea. I should do this. I should give back. Can you just highlight, I call it the positive afterglow, that feeling of gratitude, that feeling like you're doing something good, you're giving back. I know we hear about it all the time, but can you describe it for people? Because I think everybody just wants to feel good, right? We want to feel like we're contributing. Can you talk about how you felt maybe the first time you donated, and do you still maintain that afterglow despite hundreds of donations you've made in your life?
I mean, I have been fortunate enough to be in a donor center when we've had a real, like a recipient, someone who uses immunoglobulin in the center, talking about how life-changing this medication is. So for me, I hold that with me every time I'm donating. I'm thinking about who's receiving this product at the end of the day and what that means for their life, for their family, for their friends. And that really brings it back to me. I feel very proud. And I feel very honored that I get to actually contribute to somebody, living the life that they deserve to live because they're receiving this life-giving treatment. I also donate frequently with friends or with my husband. So there's also a great community aspect of it. You're sitting on the bed for, half an hour to 45 minutes and catching up on your day and just chatting or talking with the staff that are at the center. It really creates this amazing community feel. And that's part of what brings me back is it's a nice break. You get to catch up with people. And so you just feel really connected.
Yeah, that's the next thing I wanted to ask you actually about people donating in a group setting, because I think of younger people and I feel like they're much smarter than we were when we were in our 20s. I think about people going for cold plunges on a Friday night or volunteering their time with something positive. I mean, could this be a social thing? Could a group of friends on a Friday, instead of heading out to the bar, let's go to Canadian Blood Services. Let's catch up. Let's gab. Let's talk about our week. Let's dish. Let's spill some tea, but let's do it while we're also spilling some blood and giving back. Something people do or can do?
Yeah, absolutely. We love having groups come in. We have a couple different ways that you can do it. You can book a formal group appointment through our website or through our app, or you can just come in as a group. Everybody book your appointments together. We have awesome selfie signs and a selfie wall in our center. And I've said this a few times, we have great snacks. So you get to hang out with your friends and then you get to have a great cookie or bag of chips after. So, it's a win-win.
It all comes full circle with the snack. You've bookended this perfectly. We'll leave it on this then, Jessica. If there's one last message you want to leave our listeners with who maybe are sitting on a fence right now, or maybe there's a longtime donor listening, what message do you want to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, plasma donation is one of the most meaningful ways you can give back. So if you're thinking about it or you're even just considering it, come out to one of our centers and just ask us some questions. Our teams would be more than happy to walk you through the process, give you an overview of what it looks like, and just get you familiar and more comfortable with it. I know it takes about an hour to donate, but this is a huge impact for patients at the end of the day. So if you're at all curious, just come on out and give us a try. We have a website, blood.ca. We have a great app called Give Blood, or you can give us a call at 1-888-2-DONATE and book an appointment with us.
And as someone who's also donated, I promise you will go to bed that night feeling great about what you've done. Jessica Carswell, Director of Strategic Engagement at Canadian Blood Services. Thank you so much for this enlightening chat today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And that was The Big Story. We always appreciate your thoughts on our episodes. You can share them with us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca. You can also find us on X @thebigstoryfpn. Don't forget to share this episode with a friend. You can listen to The Big Story podcast every day on the Seeker app. That's SEEKR, or wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Gurdeep Ahluwalia. Thanks so much for listening.